I stare at the rearview mirror, watching the landscape blur into a smear of greens and browns. The car hums beneath us, a stark contrast to the silence that hangs heavy between Thomas and me. I am acutely aware of his presence beside me, his hands gripping the steering wheel just a little too tightly, his jaw clenched in that way I have come to recognize over the years. The highway stretches endlessly before us, a metaphor for the journey we find ourselves on. Not just this impromptu road trip, but the winding path our relationship has taken. I shift in my seat, the leather creaking beneath me, and I catch Thomas' eye for a brief moment. He quickly looks away, focusing intently on the road ahead. My mind wanders to the beginning, to those early days when every glance, every touch, every shared moment felt electric. I remember the first time I saw Thomas, his easy smile and the way his eyes crinkled at the corners when he laughed. It feels like a lifetime ago now, a memory from someone else's life. The car hits a bump, jolting me back to the present. I watch Thomas' knuckles whiten on the steering wheel. There is a tension in his shoulders that I long to soothe, but I do not dare reach out. The distance between us, though mere inches, feels insurmountable. As we pass a sign indicating the next rest stop, I consider suggesting we pull over. The words form on my tongue, but I swallow them back. The thought of breaking this fragile silence terrifies me. What would we say? What could we say that has not already been said in heated arguments and tearful confessions? I turn my gaze back to the window, watching as trees give way to open fields. The sky above is a clear, mocking blue, as if nature itself is oblivious to the storm brewing within our car. I close my eyes, feeling the warmth of the sun on my face, a stark contrast to the cold knot of anxiety in my stomach. Memories flood unbidden. The first apartment we shared, the dreams we whispered to each other late at night, the promises we made. I remember the feeling of invincibility, the certainty that our love could weather any storm. How naive we were. The car slows as we approach a curve in the road. I open my eyes, catching sight of our reflection in the side mirror. We look like strangers, two people who happen to end up in the same car by chance rather than choice. I barely recognize myself, and I wonder if Thomas feels the same way. As the road straightens out again, I find myself longing for the simplicity of those early days. But I know we cannot go back. We can only move forward into the uncertainty that lies ahead. The question that hangs between us, unspoken but ever present, is whether we will make that journey together or if this road trip will be our last. The miles continue to pass, marked by the steady rhythm of the dotted lines on the asphalt. I do not know where this road will lead us, but as I watch our reflection grow smaller in the rearview mirror, I cannot shake the feeling that we are leaving more than just the familiar landscape behind. The monotony of the highway is broken as Thomas signals and takes an exit. I am momentarily startled, unsure if this was part of our loosely planned route. As we veer onto a smaller road, the sudden change jolts a memory loose. Our first major fight. I close my eyes, letting the gentle sway of the car rock me back to that night. We had been together for just over a year, still in that honeymoon phase where every disagreement felt like a betrayal of the perfection we had constructed. The argument had started over something trivial, a forgotten dinner plan, I think. But like a match to kindling, it had quickly spiraled into a conflagration of unspoken resentments and insecurities. I remember the shock of hearing Thomas raise his voice, the unfamiliar hardness in his eyes as he hurled accusations. I had matched his intensity, my own fears and frustrations pouring out in a torrent of words I could not take back. Opening my eyes, I glance at Thomas. His profile is etched with tension, a muscle twitching in his jaw. Does he remember that night, too? Does he also trace the cracks in our relationship back to that first seismic shift? The new road we are on is narrower, winding through hills that obscure the view ahead. It feels symbolic somehow, this deviation from our expected path. I wonder if Thomas chose this route deliberately, or if he is simply following some internal compass I am no longer privy to. My mind drifts back to the aftermath of that first fight. The silence had been deafening, both of us retreating to opposite corners of our small apartment, licking our wounds. I had been certain it was over, that we had irreparably broken something precious. But then, as the first light of dawn crept through each hour windows, Thomas had approached me. His eyes were red, rimmed, his voice hoarse as he apologized. I had crumbled into his arms, relief and love overwhelming me. We had made promises that morning, vows to communicate better, to be more understanding. For a while, we had kept them. But slowly, imperceptibly, old habits had crept back in. Small irritations left unaddressed, minor disagreements swept under the rug for the sake of peace. Each one a tiny pebble added to a growing avalanche. The car slows as we approach a crossroads. Thomas hesitates, clearly unsure which way to turn. I open my mouth to offer a suggestion, then close it again. This moment of indecision feels weighted with meaning, a microcosm of the larger choice looming before us. After a moment, Thomas turns left. The road immediately begins to climb, the engine straining slightly with the effort. I watch the trees thicken on either side of us, the wilderness encroaching. It strikes me that I do not know where we are going, not just on this impromptu detour, but in the larger sense. When did Thomas and I stop sharing our destinations? As we crest the hill, a vista opens up before us. Rolling hills stretch to the horizon, painted in shades of green and gold. It is breathtakingly beautiful, and for a moment I forget the tension between us. I turn to Thomas, a comment on the tip of my tongue. But the words die as I see his expression. He is not looking at the view. His eyes are fixed on the road ahead, his brow furrowed in concentration or concern. The beauty of the landscape suddenly feels like a taunt, a reminder of all the things we once shared, and now seem incapable of enjoying together. I turn back to my window, watching as the scenery begins to blur once more. The first detour in our relationship had ended with reconciliation and renewed commitment. As we continue down this unknown road, I cannot help but wonder where this detour will lead us. The winding road eventually leads us back to the highway, and as we merge into traffic, I feel a strange sense of loss. That brief detour, despite the tension, had felt like an adventure, a departure from the suffocating routine we had fallen into. Now, surrounded once again by other cars and the monotonous stretch of asphalt, I find my mind drifting between past and present. A truck passes us, its massive frame momentarily blocking out the sun. In that fleeting shadow, I am transported back to a summer day 3 years ago. Thomas and I had spontaneously decided to go camping. We had laughed as we struggled to set up the tent, our inexperience evident in every fumbled attempt. As night fell, we had lain side by side, gazing up at a sky full of stars, our fingers intertwined. I remember the warmth of Thomas's body next to mine, the soft cadence of his voice as he pointed out constellations. The memory fades as quickly as it came, leaving behind a dull ache in my chest. I sneak a glance at Thomas, wondering if he ever thinks about that night. His eyes are fixed on the road, his expression unreadable. When did we stop sharing our thoughts so freely? A sign for a rest stop appears on the horizon, and Thomas flicks on the turn signal. As we pull into the parking lot, I am struck by a more recent memory, a heated argument we had just a month ago. We had been at a similar rest stop, returning from a tense weekend with my family. Harsh words had been exchanged, accusations flung like weapons. I had stormed off to the restroom, tears stinging my eyes, while Thomas had retreated to the car. Now, as we park, I brace myself for another potential confrontation. But Thomas simply turns off the engine and says he is going to stretch his legs. I nod, watching as he walks away, his figure becoming smaller as he heads towards a cluster of vending machines. Left alone in the car, I am overwhelmed by the silence. It feels oppressive, filled with all the things we are not saying. I close my eyes, and unbidden, a happier memory surfaces. Our first apartment, barely more than a shoebox, but it had been ours. I remember the joy of arranging our meager possessions, the way Thomas had swept me off my feet and carried me across the threshold, both of us laughing at the cliché. A tap on the window startles me from my reverie. Thomas is back, holding 2 cups of coffee. As I accept mine, our fingers brush, and for a moment I feel a spark of the old connection. But then Thomas withdraws, settling back into his seat without a word. As we pull back onto the highway, I sip the coffee, grimacing at its bitterness. It reminds me of the countless mornings we had shared, Thomas bringing me coffee in bed, a simple act of love that had somehow fallen by the wayside. The landscape outside begins to change, urban sprawl giving way to farmland. A billboard advertising a local fair catches my eye, and suddenly I am remembering our 3rd date. Thomas had taken me to a county fair, insisting on winning me a ridiculously large stuffed animal. We had ridden the Ferris wheel as the sun set, and at the top he had kissed me for the first time. My heart had soared higher than the wheel itself. Now, sitting beside him in this car, I wonder what happened to that stuffed animal. When had we packed it away, along with so many other symbols of our early love? A car cuts in front of us abruptly, forcing Thomas to brake hard. The sudden jolt snaps me back to the present. Thomas mutters under his breath, his knuckles white on the steering wheel. For a moment, I see a flash of the passionate, expressive man I fell in love with. But then his face settles back into its mask of neutrality. As we continue down the highway, I find myself caught between these crossing memories, the joy and the pain, the love and the disappointment. Each mile seems to bring a new recollection, some sweet, others bitter. I realize that our relationship is like this journey, a complex tapestry of experiences, impossible to unravel into simple threads of good or bad. The sun begins to dip towards the horizon, casting long shadows across the road. I do not know where we will end up when night falls, both literally and figuratively. All I know is that we are still moving forward, even if I am not sure what lies ahead. The sun has almost disappeared behind the horizon, casting an orange glow across the dashboard. Thomas flicks on the headlights, illuminating the road ahead. We have been driving for hours, the silence between us punctuated only by the occasional direction from the GPS. As we approach a sharp bend in the road, a memory surfaces. One I had buried deep, one that changed everything. It was 6 months ago. A work event, too much wine, and a moment of weakness that I have regretted every day since. I close my eyes, the shame washing over me anew. I had not meant for it to happen, had not even realized how close to the edge I had been until I was already falling. The car swerves slightly as we navigate the curve, and my eyes snap open. Thomas is gripping the wheel tightly, his focus intense. Does he know? The question has haunted me for months. I had convinced myself that telling him would only cause unnecessary pain, that I could bear this burden alone. But the secret has festered, poisoning every interaction, every touch. As we straighten out on the other side of the bend, I steal a glance at Thomas. In the dim light of the car, shadows play across his face, making him look older, more careworn. I wonder if he has secrets of his own, burdens he has been carrying silently. The thought sends a chill through me. The road stretches out before us, dark and foreboding. It reminds me of the weeks following that night, how I had walked through our life together feeling like an imposter. Every kind word from Thomas, every loving gesture had been a knife twisting in my gut. I had withdrawn, making excuses to avoid intimacy, both physical and emotional. A sign warns of another sharp curve ahead. As Thomas slows the car, I feel words rising in my throat. The confession I have held back for so long threatens to spill out. My heart races. My palms grow sweaty. This could be the moment that destroys us completely. But as we round the curve, a deer darts into the road. Thomas curses, slamming on the brakes. The car fishtails, and for a terrifying moment, I am certain we are going to crash. Thomas wrestles with the wheel, his face a mask of concentration. The world outside becomes a blur of motion and shadow. Finally, we come to a stop, the car angled across both lanes. The deer is nowhere to be seen. For a moment, the only sound is our heavy breathing and the tick of the cooling engine. Then Thomas turns to me, his eyes wide with residual fear and something else. Concern.
Are you okay?
I nod, unable to speak. The adrenaline is still coursing through my veins, but beneath it is a profound sense of relief. Not just at our narrow escape, but at the realization that in that moment of crisis, Thomas' first thought was for my safety. As Thomas maneuvers the car back onto the road, I feel the weight of my secret pressing down on me. The near accident has shaken loose something inside me, bringing into sharp focus the precariousness of our situation. We have been driving on a dangerous curve for months, each of us holding tightly to our own side of the road, neither willing to risk crossing the center line. The darkness outside seems to press in on us as we continue our journey. I do not know if I will find the courage to confess, to lay bare the truth that has been corroding us from within. But as I watch Thomas' profile, illuminated intermittently by passing headlights, I realize that we cannot continue like this. Something has to give. The road ahead is uncertain, full of potential hazards and hidden curves. But the alternative, continuing this silent, parallel existence, suddenly seems unbearable. As we drive deeper into the night, I steel myself for what must come next, knowing that whatever happens, we cannot go back to the way things were. The dangerous curve we just navigated feels like a turning point, a wake-up call. Whether it leads to reconciliation or the final unraveling of our relationship remains to be seen. All I know is that we cannot stay in this limbo any longer. The truth, with all its potential for destruction and healing, is waiting just around the next bend. The rhythmic hum of the engine suddenly changes, a discordant note breaking through the monotony. Thomas frowns, his eyes darting to the dashboard. A warning light flickers to life, its angry red glow a harbinger of trouble. He mutters something under his breath, and I feel the car losing speed. We limp off the highway, the engine sputtering ominously. A sign for a small town appears in the headlights. Millbrook, population 2,743. It is as good a place as any for an unplanned stop, I suppose. Thomas guides the car down the main street, which is deserted at this late hour. The storefronts are dark, their windows reflecting our headlights like accusing eyes. We come to a stop in front of a dimly lit motel, its neon sign flickering weakly. "Looks like we are staying here tonight," Thomas says, his voice flat. It is the most he has said to me in hours. I nod, not trusting myself to speak. As we check in, the night clerk eyes us with mild curiosity. I wonder what he sees. A couple on a romantic getaway, or two strangers forced together by circumstance? The irony is not lost on me that both perceptions would be equally false and true. Our room is small and dated, with faded floral wallpaper and a sagging double bed. Thomas drops our overnight bags on the floor and announces he is going to find a vending machine. The door closes behind him with a soft click, and I am left alone, with my thoughts. I sit on the edge of the bed, the springs creaking in protest. This forced stop feels symbolic somehow, as if the universe itself has decided we need to pause and confront what we have been running from. The confession I almost made earlier bubbles up again, pressing against my lips. A knock at the door startles me. It is not Thomas. He would have just come in. Cautiously, I open the door to find an elderly woman standing there, a plate of cookies in her hands. She introduces herself as the owner's wife and insists on giving us the cookies as a welcome to Millbrook gesture. Her kindness is unexpected and almost overwhelming in its normalcy. As I thank her, I catch sight of Thomas returning from the vending machines. For a moment, I see us through this stranger's eyes. A couple, tired from traveling, grateful for a small kindness. The woman smiles at Thomas as she leaves, commenting on what a lovely couple we make. I watch Thomas' face, searching for a reaction, but his expression remains unreadable. Back in the room, we sit on opposite sides of the bed, the plate of cookies between us like a peace offering neither of us is brave enough to accept. The silence stretches, filled with the hum of the ancient air conditioner and the muffled sounds of a TV from the next room. Thomas finally says, his voice oddly gentle,
We should try to get some sleep. I will call a mechanic in the morning.
I nod, suddenly exhausted. As we prepare for bed, moving around each other in the small space, I am acutely aware of the distance between us. It is more than physical. It is a chasm of unspoken words and unfulfilled promises. Lying in the dark, listening to Thomas' steady breathing beside me, I am transported back to countless nights we have shared. Nights of passion, of whispered dreams, of comfort in each other's arms. And more recently, nights of silent distance, each of us retreating to our own internal worlds. This mandatory stop has forced us out of the bubble of our car, out of the limbo of our endless journey. Here, in this unfamiliar room, in this unknown town, we can no longer hide behind the pretense of forward motion. We are stationary, forced to confront the reality of where we are and who we have become. As I drift towards an uneasy sleep, I wonder what the morning will bring. Will we find the courage to bridge the gap between us? Or will this unexpected detour become the final stop on our journey together? The answer lies somewhere in the darkness, as elusive and uncertain as the road ahead. The morning light filters through the thin curtains, casting a pale glow across the room. I wake to find Thomas already up, pacing the small space with his phone pressed to his ear. He is talking to a mechanic, his voice low and tense. I catch fragments of the conversation. Parts unavailable, at least 2 days, no other option. Our unplanned stop has just become an extended stay. As Thomas ends the call, he turns to me. For a moment, I see a flicker of the man I fell in love with. Vulnerable, uncertain, seeking connection. But then his walls go up again, and he simply informs me of the situation in clipped tones. We venture out into Millbrook in search of breakfast. The town is alive now, locals going about their morning routines. We find a small diner and slide into a booth, the vinyl seats squeaking beneath us. As we study the menus, I am acutely aware of how this mirrors countless other mornings we have shared. Yet now, the familiar act feels like a performance, a pale imitation of what we once were. Our waitress, a middle-aged woman with kind eyes, takes our order. She makes small talk, asking if we are just passing through. Thomas and I exchange a glance, and I see my own uncertainty reflected in his eyes. Are we just passing through? Or has this unexpected stop become a crossroads in our relationship? As we wait for our food, the silence between us grows oppressive. I trace patterns in the condensation on my water glass, searching for words to bridge the gap. Finally, I look up at Thomas. "We need to talk," I say, my voice barely above a whisper. "Really talk." Thomas nods slowly, his eyes meeting mine. "I know," he replies, and the weight of unspoken words hangs between us. We begin hesitantly, our words stumbling and halting. But as the breakfast crowd thins and our coffee grows cold, the dam finally breaks. Years of accumulated frustrations, fears, and disappointments pour out. We speak of the small resentments that have grown into insurmountable barriers, of the dreams we have let slip away, of the people we have become and the strangers we sometimes see in each other's eyes. I find myself talking about the pressure I have felt to be the perfect partner, the fear of vulnerability that has kept me from truly opening up. Thomas, in turn, speaks of his own insecurities, the weight of expectations he has placed on himself, the loneliness he has felt, even when we are together. As I listen to Thomas, I realize how much we have both changed over the years. We are not the same starry-eyed couple who set out on this journey together. Life has shaped us, sometimes in ways that have pushed us apart rather than brought us closer. The confession I have been carrying burns on the tip of my tongue. I know that if we are to have any chance of moving forward, I must lay bare this final painful truth. With a deep breath, I begin to speak, watching Thomas' face carefully as I recount that night 6 months ago. His expression shifts from confusion to hurt to anger. For a long moment after I finish, he is silent, and I fear that this is it. The final blow our fragile relationship cannot withstand. But then he begins to talk, haltingly at first, then with increasing openness. He speaks of his own struggles, moments of temptation, the times he has felt disconnected and lost. As the sun climbs higher in the sky outside, we continue to talk. We cry, we argue, we fall silent only to start again. It is painful and exhausting, but also cathartic. For the first time in longer than I can remember, we are truly seeing each other, acknowledging the flaws and the pain alongside the love that has kept us together despite it all. By the time we leave the diner, we are drained but somehow lighter. Nothing has been resolved, not really. The issues that have plagued us cannot be fixed in a single conversation, but as we step out into the unfamiliar streets of Millbrook, I feel a glimmer of something I had thought lost: hope. We have been forced to recalculate our route, both literally and figuratively. The path ahead is unclear, filled with potential pitfalls and difficult choices. But as Thomas reaches for my hand, his touch tentative but real, I realize that for the first time in a long while, we are facing that uncertainty together. The next day dawns with a strange mix of anticipation and dread. Our unexpected stay in Millbrook has stretched into its second day, the car still in the shop awaiting parts. Thomas and I find ourselves wandering the streets of this small town, our steps aimless but somehow purposeful. We end up in a small park, sitting on a bench overlooking a pond. Ducks glide across the surface, leaving ripples in their wake. It strikes me as a fitting metaphor for our relationship. The surface may appear calm, but beneath, currents of emotion and unresolved issues continue to swirl. "Where do we go from here?" Thomas asks, breaking the silence. His voice is soft, uncertain. I turn to look at him, really look at him, for what feels like the first time in ages. I see the lines of worry etched around his eyes, the gray starting to pepper his temples. When did we both get so old? I do not have an answer for him. The truth is, I am as lost as he is. Our conversation yesterday laid bare the cracks in our foundation, but it did not provide a roadmap for repair. We are at a crossroads, and the decision we make here will determine the course of our lives. I do not know, I admit, my voice barely above a whisper. But I know we cannot go back to how things were. Thomas nods, his gaze fixed on the pond.
No, we cannot.
We sit in silence for a while, each lost in our own thoughts. I find myself reflecting on our journey. Not just this ill-fated road trip, but the years we have spent together. The joy, the pain, the love, the disappointments. All of it has led us to this moment, this decision. Do you still love me? The question slips out before I can stop it, hanging in the air between us. Thomas turns to me, his eyes searching mine. After a long moment, he says,
Yes, but I am not sure if that is enough anymore.
His words hit me like a physical blow, even though I have had the same thought myself. Love has never been our problem. It is everything else that has eroded the foundation of our relationship. I love you too, I say, my voice cracking. But you are right. Love is not enough if we cannot find a way to grow together instead of apart. As the sun begins to set, casting long shadows across the park, we talk. Really talk, in a way we have not in years. We discuss our fears, our hopes, our disappointments. We acknowledge the ways we have both contributed to the breakdown of our relationship and the work it would take to rebuild. I am scared, I admit, as darkness falls around us. Scared of trying and failing. Scared of not trying and regretting it for the rest of my life. Thomas reaches out, taking my hand in his. The gesture is familiar yet foreign, comforting yet terrifying.
I am scared too. But I think I am more scared of walking away without knowing if we could have made it work.
As we walk back to the motel, hand in hand, I realize we have made a decision, even if we have not explicitly stated it. We are choosing to try, to fight for what we once had and what we could potentially build anew. It will not be easy. The issues that brought us to this crossroads cannot be resolved overnight. We will need to relearn how to communicate, how to support each other, how to love each other in the ways we each need. There will be setbacks, arguments, moments of doubt. But as we reach the motel, I feel a glimmer of hope. The car will be fixed tomorrow, and we will continue our journey. But it is no longer just a physical journey. It is a journey of rediscovery, of rebuilding, of choosing each other every day. As we prepare for bed, the tension that has been our constant companion for so long feels different. It is still there, but it is tinged with possibility now, rather than resignation. We are standing at a crossroads, yes, but we are facing it together. I do not know what the future holds for us. The road ahead is long and uncertain. But as I drift off to sleep, Thomas steady breathing beside me, I know that whatever comes, we will face it as a team. And for now, that is enough. The mechanic calls early in the morning. Our car is ready, he says. As we pack our meager belongings, the small motel room feels different somehow. It's as if the walls have absorbed our confessions, our tears, our tentative steps towards reconciliation. We check out, and I catch a glimpse of us in the lobby mirror. We look tired, but there's something else there too. A spark of determination, perhaps even hope. The night clerk who greeted us when we arrived nods a goodbye. I wonder if he can sense the shift between us, or if we appear to him as just another couple passing through. The walk to the mechanic's shop is quiet, but it's not the strained silence of before. Our hands brush occasionally, and each time I feel a small jolt of electricity. It's reminiscent of our early days when every touch felt charged with possibility. As we approach the car, gleaming in the morning sun, I am struck by how it seems both familiar and foreign. It's the same vehicle we arrived in, but we are not the same people who stepped out of it 2 days ago. Thomas speaks with the mechanic, handling the payment. I stand by the passenger door, my hand resting on the sun-warmed metal. Through the window, I can see our belongings scattered across the back seat, a visual representation of our lives intertwined. We slide into our seats, the leather creaking softly beneath us. For a moment, neither of us moves to start the engine. The air is thick with unspoken words and the weight of the decision we've made. Finally, Thomas turns to me,
Are you ready?
and I know he's not just talking about the drive ahead. I nod, offering a small smile. As ready as I'll ever be. He starts the car, and as we pull out of Millbrook, I watch the town recede in the side mirror. This unexpected detour has become a pivotal moment in our journey, a place where we chose to fight for us rather than give up. The open road stretches before us, full of promise and uncertainty. We have no real destination in mind now. Our original plans seem trivial in the face of what we've experienced. Instead, we drive, letting the miles unfold beneath our wheels. As the landscape changes around us, we talk. It's not the raw, emotional outpouring of the past 2 days, but something gentler. We share memories of happier times, reminiscing about the early days of our relationship. We tentatively discuss plans for the future, careful not to promise more than we can deliver, but allowing ourselves to hope. There are still moments of tension, instances where old habits threaten to resurface. But now, instead of retreating into silence, we address them. It's awkward and sometimes painful, but it feels like progress. As the sun begins to set, painting the sky in brilliant hues of orange and pink, we pull over at a scenic overlook. We stand together, leaning against the hood of the car, watching as the day comes to a close. "Do you think we will make it?" I ask, voicing the fear that still lingers despite our best intentions. Thomas is quiet for a long moment, his eyes fixed on the horizon. Then he turns to me, taking my hand in his.
I don't know, but I think it's worth trying. We're worth trying for.
I squeeze his hand, feeling a surge of emotion. I think so too. As we get back in the car, I glance in the rearview mirror. The sun has dipped below the horizon, leaving a faint glow in its wake. It strikes me as a fitting metaphor for where we are. The difficulties of the past behind us, but their effects still visible, shaping the path ahead. We drive into the gathering darkness, the headlights illuminating the road before us. I don't know where we're going, both literally and figuratively. Our future is as uncertain as our destination. But as I look at Thomas, his profile illuminated by the dashboard lights, I feel a sense of peace. We are not the same couple who started this journey. The cracks in our relationship are still there, but now they're out in the open, acknowledged and ready to be addressed. We have a long way to go, many miles to travel both on this road and in our relationship. But as we drive into the night, I realize that the horizon in the rearview mirror is not an ending, but a new beginning. We are choosing each other, choosing us, with every mile we travel. And for now, that choice, that commitment to try, is enough to keep us moving forward, together.
Hey there, Unraveling Ties family. Thank you so much for listening to today's story. I hope it touched your heart, made you think, or even inspired you in some way. We would love to hear your thoughts and feelings about this story. Don't be shy. Leave a comment below and share your perspective with our community. Your voice matters to us. If you enjoyed today's story and want to be a part of our journey as we unravel the complexities of human relationships, be sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. That way, you'll never miss a new story. We're always eager to explore new angles and dive into the themes that resonate with you the most. So tell us, what kind of stories would you like to see in upcoming episodes? Your input helps us create content that you'll love. And hey, if today's story reminded you of a personal experience or a tale you'd like to share, we're all ears. Feel free to share your own stories in the comments. Who knows, your story might even inspire a future Unraveling Ties episode. Once again, thank you for being a part of the Unraveling Ties family. Your support means the world to us. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button. Until next time, keep embracing the ties that bind us and never stop exploring the depths of the human heart. See you in the next video.